So my name's John, as Liz said. I have been an instructor at Knowles for about a decade now. I took my IC pretty much a year ago to the month, or 10 years ago to the month. Yeah, you're like, wait a minute. And I also have worked in town at Knowles. A greater part of my Knowles career was spent working as the operations manager of the Knowles Pacific Northwest branch, where I would often describe my job as unplugging stuff and then plugging it back in. I got really good at that. And I have been teaching leadership seminars for the last few years. And this workshop I'm about to give occupies probably about 70% of my thinking most of the time. This is a model that I first was exposed to via Knowles while I was in graduate school at the Leadership Institute of Seattle, who has a rich history with Knowles. In fact, a lot of the first graduates from LEOS were the founders of what we now think of as our leadership curriculum. And so I wanted to give a little homage to the folks at Knowles who have come up through LEOS and the really neat partnership that we've had with that institution over the years. So I'm really excited to be here. This is an opportunity for us to explore something together that might be a little bit out of the standard avenue of things that we talk about at the summit. And with that, I'd like to lead in with a little bit of framing before we kind of dive into the model. So yeah, go ahead and click that next one. So the first thing is that if you're like me, you come to the summit already thinking about what you're going to take back to your students. And I think that by and large, that's a really good way to approach these kinds of educational experiences. And that is not how this workshop is designed. And so the first key piece of framing I'd like to offer is that this is for us as humans first and as educators second. One of the big pieces of affection I have for the Knowles leadership model is its applicability to my life as a human. And that means that it's applicable to me as a dad, as a husband, and as a friend. And so that's the lens that I'd like to offer as our first piece of framing for what we'll be talking about. The second is this is a personal trip. Okay, so at Knowles we go on personal trips. And why do we go on personal trips? Okay, they're fun, yeah. So I do hope this is fun. If it is not, I have done something wrong. Yeah. And why else do we go on personal trips? Yeah, experience, okay. My assumption is that we seek experience because in some way we want that to filter down to our students eventually, right? But the reason that we bracket it as a personal trip is that there are things that we might be willing to talk about or do that we might not do with students around, okay? So the end product of this class is not a template for self-awareness for you to necessarily go and teach on your next course. You can think of this as like a personal trip, and an interesting one at that, I hope. Okay. The third piece is that self-awareness is a technical skill, and it requires a lot of practice. My intention in bringing this up right now is to deflate this dichotomy that we have of hard and soft skills. I think that at Knowles, everything we teach is a skill, and I think that all of these things that we think of as traditionally soft skills are actually some of the hardest ones that we practice at the school and that we teach. So it's a technical skill, and it requires a lot of practice. Yeah. What was that? Where'd you get that?
We're working on it. Yeah. We're just going to ignore this for the moment.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, so this practice is always available. So unlike some of our other skills that we teach, like say rock climbing, where you have to go to a rock climbing location in order to get better at it, or river kayaking, with a necessary ingredient being a river. Self-awareness, the only ingredient that you need is a self. And there is a long philosophical tradition of discussing what the self is, and we're not going to go down that route in this workshop because that's full of all sorts of rabbit holes. But I do hope that something that you walk away with is thinking, wow, okay, this is something that I can do in any relationship and in any situation in my life. Okay. So self-awareness, it's one of our leadership skills. We evaluate students on their levels of self-awareness. We evaluate our own. We evaluate our co-instructors. What do we talk about when we talk about self-awareness at Knowles? What is it?
I think we talk about how we impact people around us.
Okay.
Yeah, and other people's perceptions of us.
Okay. Yes. So an awareness of my impact on other people. Is that accurate? Okay. What else? Yeah.
Also think about it in terms of goals, and does the student know, like, or do I know, like, where my skills are at and where how to bring them forward?
Okay. Yeah, so the way I'm hearing that is sort of an assessment on my strengths and areas of growth. Okay. Yeah.
Understanding your thought patterns and emotions and triggers and how you respond in different scenarios.
Yeah. Okay, so that, you just like teed me up perfectly, Jake. This is one that I don't hear talked about as much. I hear those first two talked about a lot. My awareness of my impact on others, which I might argue is not actually self-awareness. I might argue that that is other awareness. And an awareness of my strengths and areas of growth. I might also argue, if I was feeling risky, that that's actually more judgment and decision-making than it is actually self-awareness. So I am inclined to believe that self-awareness is in line with what you had suggested, Jake, that it is my ability to gain clarity about my internal process and experience from moment to moment. And I think that this is one of the hardest things in the world. Okay? So just take the next 30 seconds, okay, and take this definition of self-awareness and see if you can zone in on what your internal process and experience is right now in this room. Okay. Is anyone willing to share what they noticed just within that short and awkward period of silence? Yeah.
It's much harder to hone in on your internal process and more easy to be like, oh, I wonder what these people are thinking about, or isn't this weird?
Yeah, totally. It's uncomfortable to shift the spotlight inward. Yeah.
Experiencing gratitude to be in a room of people who care about this as much as I do.
Yeah, so you felt thankful? Oh. Yeah.
Found myself very analytical and like reading the definition over and over again, being like, I don't know if I understand this. Does everybody else understand this? And then I was like, oh, actually, like, as I'm reading it more and more, like, my internal process is I need to read it over and over again to understand what my internal process is. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Very meta. I like it. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So yeah, we just exercise self-awareness. Okay, that's the kind of practice that I'm referring to, is taking a moment and saying, what is going on for me internally? And the next bit of time is going to be us looking at a couple of tools that we can use to help make that process clearer or more concise or more exploratory. Okay, so I have some desired outcomes. or learning objectives. Now that Jamie's in the room, I'm like, oh crap. All right. So the first is that you leave being able to understand and distinguish between thoughts and emotions. That you might be able to identify and name some underlying intentions that drive your and others' behavior. That you can use somatic sensations or bodily sensations as clues to communicate and make decisions. And the last is that we spend some time experimenting with the concept of immediacy. So these might not make sense yet, but my hope is that they will in the end. Okay, so why this dimension of self-awareness? This dimension being not your awareness of your strengths and areas of growth, not your awareness of your impact on others, but awareness of your internal process and experience. So it's my belief that the process of gaining clarity can allow me to choose, all right, such that I don't sanitize the things that are going on for me internally when I choose to express them, but neither am I hijacked and I express them without some intentionality. So informed choice. Similarly, I like to think of this sort of relationship between responding to a situation and reacting to a situation, and the tools for response being to reflect. So I think that reflection is essential for this dimension of self-awareness, and I think it actually allows us to serve our students better, particularly in intense situations, if we're able to reflect as opposed to react reflexively. And lastly, and this one is I'm going to out myself, and this is the most important to me, is that it can deepen and authenticate my relationships. In other words, if I can take the time to gain clarity about my internal process and communicate that with skill, compassion, and intentionality, then I have found that it deepens my relationships and I am able to be more authentic, which therefore gives permission to other people to be more authentic. So data flow is a little bit of a jargony word. Another word would just be communication. It promotes authentic communication. Okay. So I'm going to stop here. Does anything not make sense so far? If anybody, what's that?
I said the pressure.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take that as we're good to move forward. Okay, so this is a model. And my friend Ben Lester here shared a quote with me not too long ago from a British statistician named George Box. And he said that all models are useless, or all models are wrong, but some of them are useful. So a little bit about the history of some self-awareness models and how they've come through Knowles. So raise your hand if you're familiar with the awareness wheel. Cool. All right, raise your hand if you've taught the awareness wheel on a course. Okay. All right. So the awareness wheel was developed by a couple named Sherrod and Phyllis Miller. And they brought it to the Leadership Institute of Seattle in the late 70s. And the Leadership Institute of Seattle was doing some interesting trainings around this model called T groups or training groups. And the model of a training group is that you sit in a circle with about 10 to 15 people and you talk about what is coming up for you in the moment. Another term, it's been called emergent models or integrative groups. But Sherrod and Phyllis Miller developed this model called the awareness wheel out of those training modules. Eventually, the model came to LEOS, and the LEOS faculty said, well, this is a great model, yet it doesn't quite fit with what we're trying to do and teach around leadership. And so two main things happened. The first was that they brought more focus to this process of sensing, which is not on here, but sensing being sort of the first door through which self-awareness happens. And then the second big change was that they added somatic sensations. At that time and currently, there's a lot of really interesting work being done on somatic sensation as far as how it's being used in therapy, how it's being used for decision-making models, and they thought that it should have a place within this model. So they developed the self-awareness model, which I have gotten permission to start calling the self-awareness quad. All right, and the reason I call it a quad is because it looks like a map, right? And we call maps at Knowles, we call them quads. And the linchpin to this workshop, as far as metaphors go, is that internal experience is a wilderness. It's very wild. It's very confusing. There's a variety of topography, right? There's thoughts, emotions, desires, and somatic sensations. And just me saying, like, okay, go ahead and reflect on what's happening in the moment. If you're anything like me, you get really kind of overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I got all this stuff going on for me. And so I like to think of this as like, hey, this is a map. And what it is helping is with your navigation through your internal terrain. Okay?
John, can you express somatic sensations using other words?
Bodily sensations, physiological happenings. Yeah. I think
As in your
somatics.
own?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can't really experience mine.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to spend some time going through each one of these quadrants, and then we're going to do a couple activities. So the first one I'm going to start off with is thoughts. And I'm going to switch media here for just a second to talk about this model that maybe many of you are familiar with, but it's called the ladder of inference. Raise your hand if you've seen this before or have heard of it. Okay, great. So the ladder of inference suggests that I start by observing some data. Okay, so as I'm in this room right now, I'm looking around and I am starting to observe. I see people that I know. I see people that I don't know. Johnny's smiling at me right now. Now he's giving me like a fist bump, okay? So now like I'm emerging to this next run where I'm starting to select my data, right? And I'm zoning in on certain things. Like are people looking at me? Are they nodding their heads? Are they confused? Or they have that furrowed brow look? I got a smile over there. Okay. All right, so now I'm selecting data, right? And I am adding meaning to that data, okay? If I see a furrowed brow, I might think, oh, I am being confusing. If I see someone smiling and nodding, I'm like, okay, I explained that all right, okay? So I'm beginning to add meaning to all of this data that I'm observing. I'm starting to make some assumptions. Right? I'm starting to think, okay, like this is going all right. I'm assuming that this speed that I'm speaking with and the words that I'm choosing are landing all right. And then I'm drawing a conclusion. Okay, the workshop's going well so far. I adopt a belief. Okay, I am good at teaching this thing, like Liz said. And then I'm taking action, right? I am saying things. I am sharing things with you. I am choosing not to share things with you in the moment. But all of this happens within a nanosecond, right? I go very quickly from observing data to taking action, right? And I'm climbing up this entire rung. And eventually, what I arrive at is what's called a mental model. And a mental model is the image, assumption, or story which I carry in my mind of myself and other people and institutions and every aspect of the world. Okay? So my mental model is how I am cognitively making sense of the world. And an easier way to ask, I say that is, what is the story I am making up? Okay? So I am taking ownership that that process of climbing the ladder is mine. Okay? All right, so now what I'd like you to do is with someone next to you, you're going to select a partner, and what I'd like you to do is link hands and prepare yourself for a thumb war. Okay? And if you've done this activity, I ask you to just play along, okay? Okay. Now, there are 3 rules, okay? The first is you must initiate the thumb war with the proper procedure, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, I declare a thumb war, okay? The second is that every time you pin your partner, you get a point. The third is that the most points wins.
In the room.
Yes. All right. On your mark, get set, go. All right. All right. So let's just go quickly around the room and state how many points you got. So we'll start with you, Jamie. Yeah.
Cumulatively, we got 9.
9. Okay. 6. Oh, you're.
I was wrestling double, so
Okay.
probably
10. Okay. Yeah. How about you all? 44. Okay. Big jump. All right. 64. Okay. Currently the winners. Yeah.
I play by different rules apparently. Everybody else does. I don't know their coins involved.
So let's hold that. You said I play by different rules. We're going to come back to that, okay? All right. What else? Yeah. 52 each. Okay. Nice. How about you all in the back? What'd you get?
We lost count.
Okay. All right. Yeah. How about over here? Let's start here. We'll.
Like 3.
3. Okay. Yeah. 4. All right.
We got 85 combined.
85 or 90. Nice. Okay.
We get tired of 100.
Okay.
No
No
partner.
problem. How did that feel? Yeah. All right. What did you all have? Yeah.
Well, we cheated. We thought we were cheating, and we were like, "Oh, we're gonna get 8," and then we're like, "All right, we'll play for real." And we just got 1.
Okay. So for you, it sounds like you had an idea of like what were the real rules, and then which were like the cheating rules. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. What did you? 2. Okay. All right. So let's see. We'll start with you. So how would you describe your process? What did you do?
Locked hands. We started.
Yeah.
And then we were really, both of us wanted to win.
Okay. You wanted to win.
Yeah.
All right. So I would describe, it sounds like your collective mental model as I must win. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And winning meant like going against each other. Okay. So Gary and Catherine, you got to 100?
Yes.
And what did you do differently?
Gary pinned my thumb 100 times without my fighting.
Okay. Interesting. Now, were you two fighting against each other?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So to win, I must fight. And to win, I must acquiesce. All right. Okay. We'll work together, work against each other, okay? All right. So now the interesting thing is that everyone heard the same set of rules, right? And you said, I think I was playing by a different set of rules. So what did you mean by that?
I was confused about points. I didn't know you were taking the score. I
Oh.
thought there was like you win.
Okay, you win. All right. Yeah. Okay. And then, Ben, you were talking about cheating versus real rules. So say more about that.
We said, "Oh, we could just get the most points by like if you just pin me bunch."
Uh-huh.
So we did that, and then I was like, "Well, this feels dirty."
Like as we'll get into, I don't know if that's a feeling actually. I think that might be more of a thought. But yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this feels dirty. That's an interesting mental model. All right, KG. Yeah. Yeah.
We don't play the game, so I was just letting him do what he wanted.
Okay. Yep. All right. So the point of this is that everyone had the same set of instructions, the same data set, right? Yet there were drastically different interpretations of that data, and therefore there were drastically different scores. And as we're talking right now, we are seeing different versions and different mental models that are all part of the same experience. So one of the metaphors that I like to use in this is that your mental model is like this book, right? It's this story that you create about a situation. I borrowed this from my son. The actual book has nothing to do with the workshop. Yeah. But we walk around with these stories, and we hold them right here, okay? And generally, if you're like me, you consider this capital T truth, right? Is that this situation, this is the only interpretation of this situation. These are the only interpretation of these rules. But as you begin to hold your mental model farther and farther at arm's length, you begin to see the outlines and the limits of it. And then eventually, you begin to see that there are other mental models that are part of the same situation. So does that make sense? Well, we can read this out loud a little bit later if you guys want. Yeah. Okay. So are there any reactions to that activity or to the thoughts category before we move into emotions? Yeah.
Can you flip back to the...
Yeah, you bet.
I was just thinking that, if I was standing up there and you're observing data and you're seeing one person smile and one person's brow be furrowed and one person looking at their phone, I imagine, I think this is how it is for me, is like I make all those observations and I sort of select like 3 of them. They're often like conflicting pieces of data, and then I go upwards with each one of those. And then I'm at the top and kind of like,
like you have a belief battle.
yeah, like I'm not sure, what to say or what to do because,
Yeah.
Anyway, that was just the thought I was having as I was seeing that. I imagine it happening for multiple different things all at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that this process, though it appears linear, and though it appears that like it only has room for one kind of thought, you are exactly right that sometimes we have multiple thoughts ascending the ladder at once, and often they are contradictory. Yeah.
My only question in my head is thinking about with you holding the book up to your face
Yeah.
and slowly pushing it away, like, how do you know if you're just like looking through another book in your book?
Oh.
Like, can you truly separate yourself to observe?
So can you ever...
Like biased by your own intentions.
So in other words, can you ever reach the true vantage point of objectivity?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you all think?
I guess maybe that's the
Yeah.
philosophical rabbit hole you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and it's one that I'm tempted to go down, yet I don't know what it would serve. I agree with you that achieving objectivity is nearly impossible, even though we say that that's like sort of a goal to strive for. I think the only thing that we can do is exercise awareness to these different lenses through which we are looking at a situation. Yeah. And you're right, it will be, you might enter into this sort of infinite loop where you're like, well, I'm looking at a lens, through that lens, through that lens. That's a struggle. And I don't really have a great answer for that other than I think the first practice is to try to hold whatever is your immediate lens at arm's length. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's striking me is that I'm thinking about, what stories do I tell myself? How do I make sense of things that in my own life? And I think I can relate to this, like moving the book away and begin to recognize it as a book, and maybe have moments where I can like take it away and try another book, but that the dominant book often like comes back. And just thinking about the challenge of recognizing that we have, a story that we tell ourselves, and then trying on other stories, but the challenge of like not reverting back to the stories that were like comfortable with, or that older stories.
I like that. Yeah, not reverting back to the stories that we are.
What is the next, and where do we go from there?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Kevin.
I'm just thinking like the ladder of inference is that like the infinite loop you were describing.
Yeah.
Once you've adopted a belief, then starting back at the bottom, you actually select data that either does or does not conform with that belief. Like,
Sure.
So your selection is informed by that.
Yeah.
So if most of them are smiling and nodding, you have a belief that you're teaching well. you see one person on their phone, and you make meaning of them being on their phone as a like, that person is being disrespectful and obviously teaching a great class, and they're like, they have no self-control and they can't get off Instagram.
Right.
Whereas you maybe interpret them looking at their phone.
Yeah. Or I might be attaching myself to this situation and being like, oh, when I'm interested, I laugh and smile and I'm not on my phone.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So the takeaway here is to ask yourself, what story am I making up? Is to treat yourself as though you are the author of what you are interpreting. Okay. So, emotions. The emotional life is complex. And emotions come up. And I think that one of the things that differentiates emotions from thoughts is that thoughts are sort of generated to a certain degree, whereas emotions are reactions to a situation. An emotional reaction, we don't necessarily craft that. It just sort of comes up. And one taxonomy of emotions that I find helpful is to think of all emotions as a derivative of 4 primary emotions: mad, sad, glad, or afraid. Or if you're like my high school students, you say mad, sad, glad, or a frad, because you want to make sure they all rhyme. Yeah. I did this for some high school students, and they were very very sincere when they'd be like, I feel a frad. And you're like yeah. Yeah, good job. Okay, so now the point from this is that we can think of these as roots, okay? And that we don't want to necessarily dilute the complexity of emotions by taking a more complex emotion like resentment or jealousy or elation or anxious and say, oh, actually that's just afraid or glad or sad or mad. But I like to think of these as anchors, especially when I am confused about what I am feeling in the moment, okay? Okay, so what I would like you to do is to turn to your partner right now, okay? And to the degree that you are comfortable and willing, is try to describe in one word the emotion that you are feeling right now in this room, in this moment. And it might change even as you're talking to your partner, and that's okay. Yeah.
It has to be one of these 4.
As long as you can link it back. Yeah. 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 Okay. So, who here would like to share an emotion that they are feeling as we sit here right now in this room? Yeah.
Sure. So I kind of zoomed out first and a bit anxiety and nervousness as well as intimidation. And then zoning that down, feel almost like elements of afraid.
Uh-huh.
And then jumping back into the other box, and like, ooh, I'm surrounded by a lot of very intelligent, capable people. And
Yeah. So the mental model or the story that you're making up was that everyone in here is very intelligent and capable, which I believe to be true. And the emotion that you experienced as a result or linked to that story was some anxiousness and some intimidation. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think initially I felt this one very similar to what I was sharing. I felt earlier, feeling afraid, and then through the act of sharing that, felt more kind of comfort and acceptance.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So the disclosure of fear then segued into a new emotion, which sounds like it was happy or glad.
Yeah, release. Yeah, I'm not sure what the opposite of fear would be.
Yeah. Unfear? Yeah.
Comfortable.
Comfortable, cool. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Curious?
Okay. Yeah, and where would you put curious in there?
I don't know, it made me more curious.
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it could probably be matched. Like you could have curiosity in any of those,
Uh-huh.
but I also feel glad.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is an interesting point, is that like sometimes you can like create a little cocktail of these, right? And curiosity might have multiple elements of those in that. In fact, a lot of complicated emotions are a cocktail of all of these things. Yeah, it sort of depends on the context. Yeah.
And I think when I'm learning something new, I'm usually a combo of glad and afraid.
Okay.
I've learned is a place I should strive to be.
Okay. So so you use glad and afraid as sort of a signpost of value, or in some ways like, hey, I am growing because I have these two dominant emotions. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing those that shared. I know that that's not easy, and that it can be a little awkward to say, I feel afraid. And one thing I want to acknowledge is that there is a cultural context to all of these, right? And by cultural context, I mean that based off of your culture of origin or your family of origin, emotional vocabulary and the emotional life might mean different things to you. If you've grown up in a family where emotions are expressed freely and with affection, then this quadrant might seem like a comfortable place for you. If you've grown up in a culture or a family where emotions are not as expressed, this can feel like an uncomfortable place. So you can imagine there being sort of this overlay on all of these things, and that's a really interesting place to extend your self-awareness. Is like, how does me being a white male affect which emotion I'm willing to express? How does it affect what story I'm making up in a certain situation? Okay, before we move on to somatic sensations, I want to talk really briefly about the difference between the statement I think and I feel, okay? I think it is common to confuse the two, is that often we might say I feel that or I feel like, when really what you mean is I think. So for me, a feeling statement ends after the word feel. Okay, it doesn't have the word like or that. I feel mad, I feel sad, I feel glad or afraid. Not, I feel that you are not understanding me. Okay, that is a thought, that is a story that has been made up. There might be a very real feeling associated with it, which therefore makes that story seem like that capital T truth that I'm telling you about. So I will challenge you to track how often you confuse the two. If you're like me, you do it 1,000 times a day. I feel that, I feel like, no. I think that, and my corresponding emotion is this. Reactions to this? Does it matter? Is it just semantics? Yeah.
I think that my reaction to that somehow using the word feel rather than think for me seems less loaded, especially if I'm offering something that might be difficult for another person to hear. It feels like it comes more from inside of me versus I think means like I've analyzed the situation, you're wrong. Versus I feel like you're wrong. Somehow feels like it's softer.
like it's more up for discussion.
Yeah, or if you want to put more of a positive spin on it, you're owning it more.
Okay.
It's like, this is my experience. I feel this.
Yeah. So one suggestion would be to change the word think instead of leading with feel. You might say, I perceive that you are, or I have a hunch that this is happening, or it is my assumption that. Because I think that that can have an adverse effect too. Is if you say I feel, it might mean that the other person perceives that because it's a feeling, I can't really discuss it because it's just come up for you. Does that make sense? Okay. Was there a hand back there? No. Okay. Yeah.
For me, as I'm seeing this, I think this distinction is pretty important, and I'm drawing on experience working at wilderness therapy programs where we're working with adolescents and really trying to help them identify certain emotions and separate those emotions from the thoughts that they're having and being able to connect the two. And I'm sure a lot of us have heard of sort of like the I feel statement, where you express some emotions, but then you also express the thoughts that are associated with those.
Yeah.
That's what's going through my mind.
Cool. Thanks, Kelly. Yeah.
Which I think, where's like the action step, right? Because in wilderness therapy, you might like vocalize that to a group of people, like on a Knowles course, and stop and say, hey everyone, I'm going to go through this quad right now and share what's going on with me externally. And so I'm not sure if you have that like answer at the end of this explanation of like, okay, now and then how can we do this?
Yeah, like on a Knowles course.
Yeah.
Maybe don't. I am inclined to resist like the direct application of this to a Knowles course. I think the best thing that you can do is to role model clear statements, clear thoughts, clear emotions. I think that's the first step. Yeah.
And then I would say kind of like, how do you get to some action? I think like, expressing your emotions, expressing those thoughts behind them so that you've identified that, but then also expressing, and then in the future, I hope these things are happening, or I hope this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a couple more pieces after identifying thoughts and
Sure.
emotions.
And we will spend some time on like what happens when you move out of the self-awareness and into the other awareness stage with this model. So stay tuned. Yeah.
Could you speak to, or anybody in the room really, the perception of the application of using these words to different subgroups, whether that be age, sex, culture, anything like that? How do people react or perceive your use of these directly? Or everybody?
Yeah. Any thoughts? So I oscillate between working with adolescents and adults quite a bit. And I have noticed that I am willing to dig deeper and perhaps a bit more assertively with adults and ask them to generate a difference between the two than I am with adolescents. If we're going back to that topography metaphor, I think my impression is that adolescents are still trying to like get really clear on some very basic things. And this isn't true for all adolescents, but this is true for the group that I work with. And with adults, I think that I sometimes will encourage or ask them to get clearer faster than I will with adolescents. So that's just sort of an off-the-cuff answer that's very general. But I'm curious if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
I think just knowing when to like back off from like that push of like, hey, you're like speaking an emotion. Here's what I see you're trying to go with, like in the I think, and they just keep coming back to that I feel, like rather than fighting it, just letting them share it.
Yep. Thanks. Okay, cool. So next we're going to go to somatic sensations. So this one, admittedly, is sort of where I feel the least confident in all of these grids is explaining. But here's what I have come to believe about somatic sensations and somatic feedback. I have come to believe that our bodies are excellent tools for self-awareness, and that if I extend some awareness to the sensations in my body, it often can give me some very exquisite clues as to what emotion I am feeling and what story I am making up. And I'm going to tell a story in a little while that sort of cemented that lesson for me. But in general, I look for 3 different things. Okay, so we're all aware of sort of the discussion around the fight, flight, or freeze mechanisms that we have in our body as sort of these evolutionary tools, right? Yeah. Okay. So there's a guy named Stephen Porges, and he has this theory called I might have my hands clenched, okay, or I might be feeling some sort of like shooting in my legs, okay. Hypoarousal, the freeze mechanism, he says sort of shows up more in sort of our midsection or in our stomach, and that might be an explanation of when we get nervous, we sort of or I feel that kind of swirling sensation in my stomach that's saying, like, don't move. Like, as long as you don't speak, no one will notice that you're up front giving this workshop. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The third is he calls the optimal zone of arousal. And he suggests that there are muscles and reactions that we have sort of in this facial region that indicate that we are neither in fight or flight, nor are we in freeze, but that we are optimally aroused. Okay, so that is why I think about my cheeks a lot for some reason. I think about, what am I feeling in my cheeks? Am I feeling warm or flushed? Am I smiling? Those are some very simple somatic clues that have come to make sense to me as far as what is going on. Though everybody's body is different, so I'm curious if there are any of you all that have identified a somatic sensation that you feel often that you can very clearly link to an emotion or to a thought. Yeah.
I had, when I was in conflict with one particular person in one particular way, I would always have a shooting pain right here in my hand.
Interesting.
It was really interesting.
Huh.
And then one day I noticed that, and so when I have that pain, I'd be like, oh, this is linked to that.
Oh, okay. So you began to use it. Okay, cool. Yeah, Catherine.
I cannot notice that I'm feeling stressed or anxious and know that I'm clenching my jaw really hard, and that's a clue that I'm stressed about something.
Okay. I can relate to that one. Yeah.
I think when I feel fear or nervousness, I have to kind of hunch my shoulders. And one thing I've noticed is that if I'm aware of that, I can kind of affect my emotions by changing.
So an intervention on your posture, you have found, can influence a different emotional state. Awesome. Jake.
I've been confused a couple times by if I'm saying something that I feel is really important, or
You think it's really important?
I think it's really important,
Yeah.
or it feels really true to me. I'll start crying even if it's not sad at all.
Huh. And so you're feeling confused by that? You haven't?
Yeah, I haven't been able to predict that it was going to come and just be like, oh.
Huh. Okay.
I get that too.
Pardon me.
My
What?
experiences with fear in terms of before a scary rock climb or a challenging rock climb, having poop.
Okay. Bowel movement. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the body's it's like it is. It's really in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure other people have had poops before.
Yeah. Yeah. Needing to go poop is an excellent somatic sensation. Yeah. Sometimes it can be linked to excitement too. Yeah. 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 Like in my son's case. Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, thank you for those of you that have shared them. Again, I don't know what every somatic sensation means, nor do I think that there are experts that know what everyone means. But I think the takeaway is that whoa, like extend some awareness to your body and start to hypothesize about what that could possibly mean and how that could possibly be linked to an emotional state. Okay, we're going to keep moving. So the last one, intentions and desires. So there's a guy named Rob Schachter, and he came up with this thing called the depth model. And his premise was that we have layers of desires and we have layers of intentions. And he categorizes them as my true intentions, my truer intentions, and my truest intentions. So in other words, a lot of times what we articulate or believe are our intentions are really just a layer of what we really want from a situation. Okay. There's some work by a guy named Mark Jones that talks about this bottom level, this truest level, and he calls that layer the undeclared stance. Okay, so it is a intention or a desire that is absent from a conversation or a situation in that it's not being articulated, yet it is implicit. It is driving the ship. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. I was on a road trip with my wife and my son a couple of years ago. He had just turned 1, and we were coming back from this wedding. It was a really fun weekend, and we were pretty tired. And it was like 4 p.m, and we were driving through central Washington, which is sometimes described as the armpit of Washington. And we stopped at a McDonald's. And we stopped at McDonald's because not because we want to eat their food, but because their bathrooms are generally immaculate. And my son needed to be changed. So I took him into the bathroom, and I was trying to change his diaper, and he was being super squirrely and crying, and I finally got his diaper on, and I pick him up, and I'm walking out the door of the bathroom, and I throw his diaper away, and I keep walking. And I eventually meet my wife at our table, and she says, "Oh, so where is Kay's dirty diaper?" And I said, "Oh, well, I threw it away." And my wife said, "Oh, well, okay, yeah, I usually pack them out. I just want for us to, be good parents in that way." And you would have thought that at that moment my wife had laid the nastiest insult that she could have come up with at my feet, because I got super defensive. Okay? And I launched into this really well-articulated argument about how the diaper is going to the landfill anyway, so what does it matter whether or not I pack out the diaper or if I'm just throwing it away? And hey, I'm tired, like I don't want to ride all the way back to the remainder of our trip with this poopy diaper in the back seat. It's in a bathroom. And, I'm like really dug in at this point because I think this is like a good argument. Like it's like a good mental model. And my wife is like, "Yeah, I know, I get it, but I just want us to be good parents." Okay? So I keep getting angrier and angrier, and I keep like defending this narrative. And my wife, at this point, now we're out in the parking lot in our parked car. And I'm holding onto the steering wheel, and my shoulders are hunched. And my wife asked me this question. She says, "What is this really about for you?" With the word "really" in italics. Okay? And I'm like, oh my God, what is this about for me? Okay? So I started walking myself through this quad. Okay? I started off with the thoughts. Okay, what is the story I'm making up? The story I'm making up is that my wife, the data I've selected was the phrase "good parent." Okay? So my wife is attacking my parenting. She is attacking my ability as a parent. Okay? I am under attack. That is my mental model. All right? My emotion. Initially, I was pretty mad. Okay? But then there started to be sort of this like influx of fear, right? And I started to think about like, well, what if that story's true? What if I am a crappy dad? Okay. Somatic sensations. Like I said, shoulders hunched, okay? Fist clench, all right? Like I'm like looking at myself and I'm like in this position. And then I get to this intentions and desires quadrant, and I'm like, what do I want from this situation right now? So my true desire in that moment was for the landfill argument to land. Like, I wanted her to see like the logical perfection of it, and like that it makes sense. So I wanted this like argument to land, okay? The truer desire was that I wanted to be right, okay? And I wanted to convince my wife that, hey, I'm not such a bad parent, okay? This isn't that big of a deal, okay? But my truest desire that I landed on was that I was trying to convince myself that I am not a bad dad. In the book Difficult Conversations, Douglas Stone says that we go to these great lengths to protect these various parts of our identity. There are 3 of these existential questions that we go to great lengths to answer in the affirmative. Am I good? Am I competent? And am I worthy of love? So the landfill argument was just this like sort of sign and symptom of me saying, like, I am good. Like, I am a competent dad. Like, and I am worthy of love. Now, I didn't like articulate all of this, but eventually we did get to this point where we started talking about these things, and it flipped this conversation on its head. It became a conversation way less about stances and flag planting, and it became more about, yeah, I feel insecurity as a parent too. Yes, I question my competence all the time. Yes, I am always asking, like, am I good? Okay. That's called the diaper story.
Did you choose the phrase crappy dad on purpose?
I wish I was that clever. Yeah. So we're going to go into an activity, but I don't want to leave this too quickly if there are final questions or any reactions that people would like to share. Yeah.
I think the question, I'm curious how you go back to emotions for a second, like where those 4 came from, like how did you pick those 4?
Well, I didn't pick them. This came with the model. Though, as I have tested these, and I try to like come up with some complex emotions, and I can pretty cleanly link them back to 1 or 2 of the 4. So I don't know if there's research out there about those things, but anecdotally, I have found that those 4 do sort of operate as these root emotions, as sort of the starting point for more complex emotions. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you always start from thoughts?
Not always. I think that I start there because that's the one that I believe that I have the most influence to loosen. In other words, like that's one that tends to feed those other ones more than the other ones feed that one, and that's for me. So I start to think about like, oh, can I loosen this mental model that I have going on for me right now? Yeah. But there's no starting point for any of these. Yeah, there's no order of procedure. Yeah.
What, with the undeclared stances,
Yeah.
what is like the question that you ask yourself to get from true to truer or truer to truest?
Yeah. Well, it's less of a question, and it's more of this, I imagine an image of there being a trapdoor at each layer. So if I think I land on my true intention, a question I ask myself is like, okay, there's got to be a trapdoor around here somewhere, and this is just one layer of my intention. So that's the question I ask is like, where's the trapdoor? Yeah. And just because you arrive at your truest intention and it's like not very noble and it's sort of, you might feel insecure like I do when you arrive there. I have found that like there's only a handful of undeclared stances in the world that and like doing some of this work with friends and professionally, like they usually all boil down to, am I worthy of love? Am I competent? And am I good? So I take actually great comfort in that, and that truest desires are actually like a normal experience that we all have, and that doesn't mean that the true and the truer desires aren't still applicable. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to practice. I'm going to hand out some grids that I made up of this. And I'm going to give you something to react to right now. And what I ask, you can do this while I am doing the thing that I'm going to do. Or you'll have some time afterwards to reflect and then write it down. So you can use these however you like. But we're going to come back and I'm going to eventually harvest what are the different reactions from this thing that I'm about to do. Yes. Okay. All right, so for the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to be probably distracting you with something, but what I'd like you to do is try to track what is going on for you in these 4 quadrants as clearly as you can, okay? And we're going to start now. All right, so I'm going to do a magic trick. And I need a volunteer. Jay, come on up. Yeah. All right. You volunteered pretty quickly.
I didn't have a pen.
Okay. Jay, go ahead and choose a card. All right, and go and show it to everybody.
Are you going to look?
No? Yeah. What's that? Oh, yeah. Here, Ben, you can just.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So go ahead and put it back anywhere you'd like. Or actually, you know what I'll do is just go ahead and say stop wherever you'd like.
Stop.
Okay, go ahead and put it back. Yeah? All right. Okay, so now what I need you to do is press on this button right in the middle, okay? And just like a little bit, soften it up. Okay, perfect, right there. Okay. Now, do you know what you did by doing that? Okay, is you have magically changed your card from a red back card into a blue back card. Okay? Okay, and we have one blue card in the deck right there, okay? Now, I didn't see your card, right? But everybody else saw it. So what was your card? And you can tell me, it's okay.
King of Spades.
It was the King of Spades, okay? All right, okay, yeah, all right, okay. Now, this is the first trick, so I still got to build up a little bit of credibility, right? All right, so we're going to do it one more time, okay? So what I'd like you to do is just go ahead and say stop wherever you'd like.
Stop.
Sure?
A little more.
Okay.
Stop.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay, great. Go ahead and take that card out and go and show everybody. Make sure that the back is red. Here, you got it. Now go ahead and put it back anywhere you'd like in the deck. Excellent. Okay. Now, again, one more time.
Same button.
Yep, same button. Oh, yeah. Nice. Okay. So what we've done is we have, again, changed it from a red back card into a blue back card. And we will go through the deck and arrive at one blue card and one blue card only. What was your card?
10 of hearts.
10 of hearts. Okay, so there's one blue card. Fell on the floor there. Go ahead and pick that up. And there's the 10 of hearts right there. Okay, we're done. All right, now, please take 2 minutes and fill out your grid. Like, fill out sort of serious or significant reactions in each quadrant from that. Did you have an emotion linked to that?
I was inquisitive, but I was also feeling like glad and happy. Like I was smiling, I was
Okay.
like leaning forward and like trying to figure it out, but I felt like good about it.
Okay.
I wasn't like angry or mad that I was being duped.
Yeah.
You know.
What did,
Still enjoying it.
and you said that, and we'll go over your desires again. What did you, how did you track those?
I was having a hard time deciding if these are actually my desires, but what I wrote down is like, what is the trick, what's the deception, like, and then like, how is it done? Like, what is the truth, what's really going on? And then I was questioning whether that's a real desire. Or not.
Well, the way that I interpret that is that you were saying that you wanted to know what was going on, right? And so, that seems to me like that's sort of hovering on that true level. So the next question I have is, why is it important to you to know what is going on?
So I can do it.
Okay, so you want to do it too.
Maybe.
You want to be a magician. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that's an example of like a trapdoor, right? I want to know how this is done. Oftentimes when you open that trapdoor, I find that it relates to people's sort of sense of intelligence. They're like, if I can't figure this out, it means that I'm not smart, or I want to know how this is done because I just can't leave this room without like believing that that was actually magic. That is against my rational self, for example.
Seems like where I'm going without thinking about it yet.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was feeling similar, or noticing similar thoughts, like going through those trapdoors, going from wanting to figure it out to having like a sense of control over this experience of reality. To if I have that sense of control, I have maybe a greater sense of connection and acceptance by my peers. If I don't have this sense of control or knowledge about the situation, I won't be accepted.
Interesting. Yeah. So for you, like that true desire is I want acceptance. Yeah, and this was a magic trick. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So it's not like we walk around with like these thoughts like in the forefront of our head, and nor might it always be appropriate to disclose all of these things so we make choices, right? But the point of this activity is that you can have something fairly benign, right? Activate sort of these deep-seated things in you, right? Maybe it's fear for another person, or a desire to be accepted, right? Or a desire to be seen as intelligent, or think of yourself as intelligent. Okay. So you can imagine like sort of the magic trick being like the benign situation. So imagine doing this when you're in conflict, okay? Or when you're talking about something like racism or sexism, okay? It's sort of like going from practicing a rescue sequence in the horizontal environment to a fully weighted rope, right? That's why we practice. So the last thing that I think that we have time for is just to talk a little bit about how this relates when you bring somebody else into the mix, right? So this process of getting clear on my own quad or my own terrain is complex in and of itself, yet the situation gets really complex when I add in another person, okay? So I can imagine getting clear on all of these things for me, but all of these things still being question marks, okay? So there's a family therapist named Murray Bowen who's sort of considered the father of family therapy, and he has this idea of what's called self-differentiation. And he defines self-differentiation as the ability to understand what is going on for me and to own my experience while remaining connected to you, yet not being organized by it. Okay? So Jamie, if I can use you as an example, so that very small moment where you were feeling nervous for me was an example of you being right here and sort of jumping over the net onto my side, right? And conversely, like if we were in a different situation, I might try to assuage that need of yours, and I might accept your help, okay? And Murray Bowen might call that a loss of differentiation, okay? So again, pretty benign example, but imagine that you're facilitating a conversation on a Knowles course, and a student says something that negatively impacts you, right? how do you own that it landed there on you in a certain way, yet not project it back onto them? That's the skill. That's the question that we are asking as far as how can I remain connected, yet remain differentiated? Does that make sense? Oh, I just said it. Yeah.
Are you able to use the example, like the Decker example? Like, is that an example of a median user getting hooked?
Sure. So in that example, I would say that I was trying to coerce my wife to my side of the net. Okay? I was saying, come over here. I've got a great thought. I've got this great mental model. Can't you see how upset I am by it? And don't you know that like this feeds into my deep insecurity about being a bad dad, right? And my wife remained differentiated because she asked me, what is this really about for you? Okay, so she was curious, right? She saw my sort of like, come on. And she's like, no, I'm gonna stay over here on my side of the net and let you do your thing. Yet I'm gonna ask a question that maintains our connection. And that question is, what is really going on for you? Does that answer your question? Yeah. Kevin.
I've not thought of this before now, but I see a lot of interaction between this stuff and some of the work we're doing with cultural competence, curriculum.
Yeah.
So like thinking about my map and my student's map, if I teach a leadership module and a student comes up to me afterwards and says, I don't really believe in active followership, like that doesn't really activate me all that much. I'm like, okay, like we can talk about, I have my thoughts, my mental map, and you're expressing yours, I can differentiate from that. Whereas when a student says, I think all this stuff you're saying about privilege is bullshit. I don't think white privilege is a thing. I can get so hooked or activated in that moment, and it's like I want to beat my map onto them. Or it's,
yeah. You want to just like bang them over, like overlay it. Yeah.
And it's there's a mental model, like there's a story I have about oppression and privilege in society, and there's these emotions I have, and those things help me feel like I'm a good person. And so it's like I just need them to accept my map as true, and if they don't, I'm going to be really mad about that. And I don't know what we do with that as educators, but I'm thinking about that being a real sticking point. I know that it's true for me, I guess. Yeah. You don't have the answer?
I do. Well, yeah, and I don't have a great answer for that because that's like the question. I wonder what is at stake for you personally. Like, what happens if they don't accept your map? Like, what truest desire do you have that is resulting in you wanting to overlay your experience on top of them?
I think you actually just like blurted your truest piece in there, didn't you?
I don't know.
Well, not blur. I didn't mean to say blur, but I think you said it. You were like, that's how I make myself feel like a good person. Like I have these feelings, and like white privilege is a thing, and that's my model, and that's how I feel good about myself.
Yeah. Nice pull. Yeah. The am I good? Answering that in the affirmative. Yes, I am. Yeah, Murray Bowen often talks about how to be a resource to someone without rescuing them. And I would say that trying to overlay your experience onto someone is a version of trying to rescue them. Yeah.
John, I'm just trying to check my own thinking here, but if I'm not playing through this in a way that allows me to have awareness in that moment, then my ability to differentiate with any sort of purpose is going to be limited.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so how well I'm able to do this
Yep.
it is going to be pretty important. And if I somehow allow myself to maybe don't go deep enough, or if I only end up at true, then how that's going to play out with the other person might be different or warped. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you are not, I mean, in the example with the diaper story, it took me a while to get here.
Right.
I probably could have avoided some conflict and some McDonald's parking lot time by getting a bit more clear about why I was so activated. Yeah. Okay. So the relational field. That's sort of the image. It's that there's me and there's you and there's a net between us. And we want to stay connected. but we also want to stay on our sides of the net. Okay, we have 10 minutes. So one of the things I want to do, just as a quick wrap up, and we're going to keep this quick unless Travis, I don't want to forget you. You had said, okay, great. Is we're gonna practice this for 2 minutes. We're just going to do a quick, just a quick session, all right? And instead of like reacting to something external, I want you to find a partner, someone that you don't know, and one of you is going to be the sharer and the other will be the listener. You'll switch after 2 minutes. And the sharer, there we go. Using the quad tool, share is what is coming up for you in this moment, okay? So you're going to be standing in front of a stranger, right, at the summit. See if you can lock in on what's coming up for you in that moment, standing in front of that person, all right? Note internally what you are willing to share and what you are not willing to share. You don't need to answer that out loud. Just track that. Listener, pay attention to how the sharer moves in and out of the here and now. Ask questions to get clear on what is happening, and try to paraphrase and maybe do some gentle probing. And if you need another compass, here is what's called the immediacy model, or the responsibility axis, which is a little bit more descriptive of what the here and now actually means. It means that your expressions are specific, that you are using the phrases I and me, that you are referencing the moment at hand, not a moment in the past or the future, and you are in this room. Okay, so go. Find a stranger. We're going to do like 4 minutes, quick session. Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I'll listen first.
And bring it back. So folks, our time is up. It's 3 o'clock. I wish that we had a little more time to unpack the discussion that you just had, but I'm going to hang around here for a little while if there are any other questions or thoughts or comments. I want to thank you all for coming today and for experimenting and trying out this new dimension of self-awareness. I was watching that Knowles Robots YouTube. Raise your hand if you've seen that. Okay. So it references like the 5 questions with which Knowles instructors can answer any question from a student, right? There's, let's see, red-tailed hawk, right? Look in your pack. Yeah. Okay. Look at your map. Drink more water. And what do you think? Okay. All right. So I was thinking about this, and I was like, oh, this is like a great way to end my presentation. Build up. Look at your map. Okay, like look at your quad. All right, yeah. So yeah, I'll be hanging out, and thank you very much. Yeah, this was fun. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.